In a news story in the New York Times, they highlight data from Pew showing Democrats have lost their 2018 advantage. What could they have done in the past year that they've lost the advantage that won them the House? Why, it appears embracing wokeness. Now, typically when I refer to the far left, I'm talking somewhat about economics, but mostly about this weird authoritarian ideology that wants to segregate people based on their identity. A really good example of the facade is the Green New Deal. Now, most people actually like the idea of a Green New Deal. I do. I actually really like the idea of investing money into developing new technologies and creating jobs that will help create a green infrastructure. However, the Green New Deal is actually a mask for racial identitarianism to a certain degree. It's going to institute massive economic changes, but actually wants to institute policies where people would receive benefits based on their race. I think that's kind of creepy, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. When we look at the polling data, when we look at what the New York Times shows us, we can see that a lot of these woke policies, like decriminalizing border crossings and reparations, are widely unfavorable. And that's hurting the Democrats. They're actually playing into Trump's hands. But we do have a bunch of other data I want to go through. One of the big issues is that economic populism is wildly popular. If you tell people you're going to bring back their jobs, they're happy. If you tell them you're going to increase their wages, they're happy. But if you say you're going to segregate them based on race, they get kind of upset. And that's the point. So I think it's important to separate far left from socialist and identitarian. And I'm going to focus on the wokeness, but I also want to go through other identitarian aspects of this debate. Why Trump has the support he does, who really has the advantage? That's the big question. Because the New York Times shows this data, it's neck and neck. The Democrats lost the advantage and now they are neck and neck, but 538 disagrees. So let's read through this and try and figure out who's going to win in 2020, even though I know it's still very early. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you would like to support my work. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical option. But the best thing you can do is share this video. YouTube is propping up big corporate channels like CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. I'm sure you've heard me say it a lot. If I'm going to compete with them, I have to overcome that hurdle. If you think this video is good, just share it, and that's the best thing you can really do. And if you don't think you should share it, then I don't deserve it in the first place. But let's read. This is an opinion column from David Leonhardt. He says, how important do Democrats think it is to beat President Trump in 2020? Obviously, most Democrats would say it's vitally important. 4 more years of the Trump presidency could allow him to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. And some other people. I mean, a lot of these justices are old. It would worsen the climate crisis. It could cement his paranoid racism and scorn for democracy as the new American normal. But I will stress, too, based on the ratings from CNN, I don't think Americans are actually that concerned about climate change. They want economic policy. And we have data to back that up. Given these consequences, you would think that Democrats would be approaching the 2020 campaign with a ruthless sense of purpose. But they're not, at least not yet. They're not focusing on issues that expose Trump's many vulnerabilities. They have instead devoted substantial time to wonky subjects that excite some progressive activists and alienate most American voters. Now listen, there's a bit of confirmation bias here because I agree with what this guy is saying, so of course I'm going to highlight it. So I always recommend you go and look at other YouTube channels and try and push back on my perspective and find counter arguments. I can only argue for what I see and what I think is right. And because I agree with this guy, that's the story I've chosen. There's my bias. And I've got more bias coming up in just a second, don't you worry. They say, the good news is that the campaign is still just getting started. Many Americans haven't yet paid much attention. The next phase starts Thursday night with a debate in Houston featuring the 10 leading candidates, but not the one I like, Tulsi Gabbard. He says, before I get into the polling, I want to make it clear that I'm not making the argument that some centrists and conservatives have made. By now, you've probably heard claims that Democrats are hurtling towards socialism and instead must return to the triangulation of the Bill Clinton years. The evidence doesn't support that view. I actually agree with this. Economically, people like hearing about populist positions, be it left or right. Trump won majorly, big league, whatever his word is, because he told people, I will bring back your jobs. And that played well in Midwestern and Rust Belt states. But Bernie and people like Andrew Yang are playing up the left-wing economic populist angle of, say, universal basic income or increasing the minimum wage, which is a lot of Democrats are pushing. But let's read on. He says, over the past few decades, incomes for most Americans have barely grown. Median wealth has declined. Americans are frustrated and a majority supports a populist agenda. Higher taxes on corporations and the rich, expanded government healthcare and financial aid, a higher minimum wage, even a Green New Deal. That's left-wing populism. Trump's is ending the border, the free trade agreements, tightening the border, bringing back jobs. They're both a populist agenda. You're telling people, I will personally benefit you. And there's good reasons for either side. I happen to lean more towards the populist side. I do not like the elitists, though I recognize their purpose. The Democrats are on solid ground, substantively and politically, by pushing all of these issues. They should be casting Trump as a plutocrat in populist's clothes. I agree, but they don't. They don't. Who has used the presidency to enrich himself. I don't necessarily agree with that because he's lost net worth, and other wealthy insiders at the expense of hardworking middle-class families. It's a caricature that has the benefit of truth. When pundits yearn for economic triangulation, they're the ones confusing their own policy preferences with good political advice. I'll tell you what, Andrew Yang had the best advice. I'm not a big fan of UBI, but I do like Yang because he's actually talking to moderates and he's bridging that divide. Although the $1,000 a month thing does seem kind of gimmicky, it's going to play really, really well to people who don't know better. Hey, I'll take free money, right? Promise someone money, they might vote for you. But in reality, while I understand the negative aspects of UBI, Yang presents things from a more moderate perspective. When he talked about healthcare, he says, let's stop talking about emotions and rights and talk about businesses. It would be so much easier to start a business if you didn't have to worry about healthcare. And he's right. It may not be 100% correct. It may not be the right way to go, but at least he's bringing up business in the conversation. So let me clarify that. It's nuanced. It's not like there's one thing that's going to solve the problem or be a good argument. I think healthcare on the backs of businesses is a bad idea, but it doesn't mean his solution is correct. That's the proper way I should say it. Let's read on. He goes on to say this. The mistake that Democratic candidates have made is thinking that just because they should activate their progressive ID on some issues, they should do so on all issues. There are two main examples, both of which have received a lot of airtime during the presidential debates. The first is the idea of decriminalizing border crossings so that the illegal entry into this country would only be a civil violation. Most top Democratic candidates, I'm not going to read through it, support the idea. If illegal entry weren't a crime, they say, Trump couldn't lock people in cages. How absurd. Supporters of the idea make intricate technocratic arguments about how decriminalization won't make the border less secure. But most voters tune out. They don't buy the long explanations for why the policy doesn't mean what it certainly seems to mean. Less border enforcement. In an NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll, 67% of registered voters called decriminalization a bad idea. Check this out. Now we get to the meat and potatoes. Out of step. Most of the Democratic Party's agenda is popular with the public, but several ideas being pushed by the 2020 presidential candidates, including the end of private health insurance and the decriminalization of border crossings, are deeply unpopular. Listen, decriminalizing border crossings, 67% bad idea. Reparations, 63% bad idea. Replace private insurance, 55% bad idea. Only 40% saying a good idea. And repealing Obamacare only has 45% support, with 50% saying it's a bad idea. Now let's look at this. Majority support, free public college, economic populism, minimum wage increase, economic populism. These are all the more favorable positions. Gun background checks has really wide support, with 88% in the polls. They talk about a pathway to citizenship, 63% support. Taxing the rich, a Green New Deal. Now here's what scares me. I like the Green New Deal, but this is why we have to be really careful about the Democrat position, the Democratic Party's position. While they certainly do have some economic populism that I don't necessarily agree with, the Green New Deal, as it's presented now, is not what they claim it is. It's an economic transformation, but it also instills racial identitarianism. Take a look at these two charts. Decriminalizing border crossings is social justice. It's wokeness. Slavery reparations, also wokeness. Those are two of the least popular ideas, and they're the two ideas that are on the face social justice. Everything else, private insurance and Obamacare, those are economic populist ideas. It's more socialist, it's more to the left, but it is not identitarian. You can see what people really, really don't like. Let's do this. I want to talk about what's really going on with economic populism, and I'm going to give you a bias alert. You guys know I'm a fan of Tulsi. But when you take a look at these plans, which people think are a good idea, regulating drug prices, Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, minimum wage, it's all about the money. The problem is people don't like it when the government misspends or wastes money. Tulsi points that out. Tulsi Gabbard says, Americans get pissed off when government squanders money. That's not a conservative thing. And she's right. While people certainly do like the idea of being told the government is going to help them get by, the bigger concern that I think affects moderates and conservatives is that when they hear this, they hear government bloat, overreach, and a waste of money. The Green New Deal, for instance. However, I will stress, Trump comes out and says, I'm going to bring back manufacturing, we're going to shut down NAFTA and these other arrangements. I don't know if that's the right idea, but it is the populist idea, telling people we are going to reverse policy to fix these problems. It doesn't matter in the end if it's populist or not. It matters if it works. So if Trump pulled it off, he's going to see huge gains. It's going to help him out moving into the future. However, when you come out and start playing reparations and border crossings, you're just going to make people say, no way. Look, there's a reason why Bernie was popular. And I can tell you this as somebody who was a big fan of him. It was the economic populism. And you know why I don't like him now? He just brought on Linda Sarsour. Sorry, she's an anti-Semite. I'm out. He's talking about racial identitarianism, talking about white people and being poor. And all that, he said, white people don't know what it's like to be poor. Sorry, that's where you've lost me. I'm not a big fan of free public college or a $15 minimum wage. I am a fan of addressing these issues and trying to work towards these plans. I'm a fan of forgiving student loan debt in a certain capacity, not just paying it all off and giving all the money away, but something like freezing interest rates. So I definitely lean more towards a left-wing populist view on a lot of these issues. It's the identitarianism that has soured the Democrats. And I can tell you that, me personally, that's the big issue. My policy positions are very much so leaning left. I've talked about, yes, tax the rich. I've talked about a Green New Deal, a real Green New Deal, not a racial identitarian socialist thing, but an actual investment in green technology. And I've talked about solutions for the minimum wage and how to increase it. So I have a bit of a moderate approach, leaning slightly left, as you can all expect. Let's do this. They say the Democrats have lost their advantage. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I have to show you the most important part of the story, which I brought up in the beginning. Here's the image. In 2018, favorable, Democrat, 53%, 10 points higher than Republicans. However, by 2019, it is neck and neck. You know what, man? Like I said in the past several videos, there are a group of people who favor left-wing economic populism, who have said, you know what, whatever, and they're going to vote for Trump because they are sick and tired of the authoritarian far left. Why won't they call out Antifa violence? I don't know, but I'll tell you what, the more they don't, and the more the media supports it, the more people say, I don't care about any of this. Unleash Trump. I've talked to people who are lifelong Democrats, and they just say, you know what, I don't care anymore. A lot of people on the left will say, how could you abandon your principles and the policy positions you've held and then support someone like Trump who you disagree with? And it's simple. For me, it's not the case. For me, I very much do care about these policies, and I want to make sure I stand my ground and fight for candidates who I think are going to do the right thing. But for a lot of people, they've seen a Democratic Party go so insane, decriminalizing border crossings, open borders calls from the DSA, that they're like, no. Just unleash Trump. Let Trump solve the problem. They've gone that direction. That's why I think they've lost the advantage. There are certainly people who like this, who like the left-wing populist position. The Democrats are too busy talking about other nonsense, as this guy points out. So let's look at this. 538 asks, are Democrats or Republicans winning the race for Congress? And according to aggregate polls they've collected, the Democrats have a near 7-point lead. It's 6.5 points, a near 7-point lead as of today. I don't know if that means anything because there's an idea of the secret Trump voter. It's hard to know if the polls are going to be right this time. It's hard to know what's exactly going to happen. But here's what I want to do. Let's break down some of these polls to try and figure out who's right. This shows, 538, based on the polls, that the Democrats have a clear advantage as of right now. But according to the New York Times, they don't. According to the New York Times, it's actually neck and neck. Here are some stories we can look at. First, from the Washington Examiner, Trump troubles 21% GOP to vote against the president, 52% for all voters. Trump has lost a lot of the establishment Republicans, but we all know it. The never Trumpers don't like the guy. They're mad he took over. However, this is coming from Rasmussen, and Rasmussen favors Trump. So it's interesting. Let's read a little bit. They say, according to Rasmussen reports, 52% of likely voters are more likely to vote against Trump. And among GOP voters, 21% are also considering voting against him. The key phrase in the poll was against, with many voters saying that they were not voting for a Democrat, but against Trump. That's important. It means Trump may have lost establishment voices. However, as I pointed out in a previous video I did on my second channel yesterday, Trump has changed the party. And a lot of people have mentioned this. They talked about it all through 2015 and 16, that Trump was lighting up parts of the country that didn't vote before. I met many people at Trump rallies who said they were independents who never voted, or they were for the first time going to vote for Trump. So Trump is getting moderates and he's getting new voters. Even if he loses these GOP voters, it doesn't mean it's all bad news. But let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the things from the New York Times. This is a story from July 15th I covered, but I want to highlight here, it's important. Huge turnout is expected in 2020. So which party would benefit? Democrats typically gain from a broader electorate in presidential races, but that pattern is not assured in the Trump era. Basically, what this story says is the Democrats are playing to the far left economic populist and identitarian sect, the progressive sect. But their hope is they're going to light up new voters in the same way Trump did with his populist message. But the Democrats are going to sacrifice the center to the Republicans. Even if they get a new progressive voter, they're going to lose a moderate voter or send moderate voters to Trump. That's basically what they're saying, that in the end, new voters may actually end up benefiting Trump because different areas with low voter turnout aren't necessarily going to vote left. They might end up voting right. We're expecting record voter turnout, and no one knows for sure what's going to happen. But it may be that Trump wins, probably because I think you have a lot of disaffected liberals and moderates who just don't care anymore. More importantly, one poll I love citing shows that moderates feel the Democrats have gone too far left, more so than they feel the Republicans have gone too far right. But what about the secret Trump voter? Check out this story from 2016. I can't tell my friends who I really voted for. It's very common. I did a whole segment talking about the secret Trump supporter base. But let's present some counterpoints. We'll do a little back and forth here. Rasmussen reported on August 2nd, Trump voters are likely to be more public this time around. The secret Trump voter made sense in 2016 because people were scared. They thought he was going to lose, so they hedged their bets and just said nothing. Today, we can see that many people are much more brazen and willing to come out and say they support Trump. You have the walk away campaign where people are saying, you know what? I'm walking away and I'm going to publicly announce it. That's what they're saying. However, Trump's base has grown. So even if Trump's secret voters are now being public, so you might be saying, hey, look at the polling data. It's down for Trump. It's bad news. They're neck and neck. That means they are accounting for the secret voter. Maybe not. Check this out. The New York Times says, don't assume Trump's approval rating can't climb higher. It already has. Another story I highlighted before. Millions of Americans who did not like the president in 2016 now say they do. So consider this. Yes, Trump supporters may be more vocal today, but if Trump's base is bigger than it was, and we're still seeing a neck and neck race, I think it's fair to say a lot of Trump supporters are still hiding. We saw a poll the other day from College Fix. 73% of college Republicans hide their political views. These people are going to come and vote. These young people, they're going to come out and vote, and they're going to vote for Trump. However, there's still the counterpoint that young people on the left, because they're being activated by social media, will come out and vote. It is a difficult position. It's so hard to predict what's going to happen. I got to stress that point. There's so many factors here, but let's read on. The Trump voters who need for chaos obliterates everything else. Political nihilism is one of the president's strongest weapons. Another op-ed from the New York Times. This makes everything uncertain. The chaos vote. People on social media forums who make memes and support the president, not because they like him, but because they love the absurdity and the insanity and the chaos. And you can't count on these people in the polls. The chaos vote may be the vote that gets Trump the win. Look at the Democrats, their establishment, their mainstream, their squares, their unhip. The chaos vote wants something to shake up the system. The real estate reality TV president, that's as chaotic as you can get. Some people just want to watch the world burn. But some people don't necessarily want to watch it burn. They just want to see it get shaken up a little bit. Change things. Life is boring. Let's see something interesting for once. They don't think Trump is really going to burn everything down. They think he's going to come up and just wipe the slate clean and shake things up a bit. But here's another really important point. From the same author, we aren't seeing white support for Trump for what it is. A crucial part of his coalition is made up of better off white people who did not graduate from college. They like to claim Trump's base, it's made up of people who are uneducated and poor, impoverished. But what they fail to see is that just because people didn't go to college doesn't mean they're poor. A lot of his support may be coming from people who are self-made entrepreneurs and business people. There's a poll down here I want to show you. They say this: in 2010, Republican support was 50% white, no college or less than a college degree, and 40% white with a college degree. In 2018, it was 59% no college and 29% white with a college degree. But these are percentages. What they don't show you is that Trump's base is bigger. Trump recruited people who haven't voted before. He has lost some people who voted GOP, 21% or so according to that one poll, so maybe. The college-educated people have said, I refuse to vote for Trump, but his base is still bigger. So what we don't know is the relative proportions. Just because the percentage is up doesn't mean that Trump is losing. It could be that Trump has activated a large portion of voters who haven't voted, and we know that's basically the point. So here's kind of the point I'm trying to bring up. In the first story, we can see that wokeness and the far left ideology, not necessarily economics, is hurting the Democrats, at least to a certain degree. We know that Tulsi Gabbard has pointed out it's not a conservative thing to get mad when the government wastes money. But in the end, the question is, who is going to win? And I gotta say, I think Trump will. But who will reclaim the House? I'm not so sure. While 538 says the advantage is held by the Democrats, I'm not entirely convinced the polls are right for several reasons, notably the chaos vote. People who don't answer polls and the secret Trump voters and the expansion of Trump's base. As I stated yesterday and the day before, people who come out to vote for Trump are going to check all across the board. And perhaps we're not tracking them properly. In the end, the only thing I think is really important to point out is that the Democrats can win if they get away from the wokeness. If they get away from this and they talk to people about how they can make their lives better. I don't think they will, though. That's why I think in the end, advantage Republicans. Now, look, the data says neck and neck. So, okay, that's fine. I'm biased a little bit. We'll see what happens, though. But I do think Trump is going to win. I could be wrong. Stick around. Next segment will be coming up at 6 p.m. youtube.com/TimCastNews, and I will see you all there.